Okay, so when I was considering what we were going to do for this time of Zen Times, um, I reflected back on some of the some of the things that have come through my life, readings and people and all that kind of stuff, that have made a difference. And there was one reading that did really appeal to me, that I wanted to use as the base of our talk. As I have mentioned, throughout these Zen times, the importance of reminding ourselves to remind, to come back home. So often our attention, our energies, and are hooked by fear and uncertainty, and it draws us away from our center. It draws us away from being able to cultivate and rely on a much deeper kind of wisdom that makes a whole lot more sense in terms of how we are um, in the world. I want to share two stories from very famous prophets that I think really are very powerful. The first one is in the Bible when a woman was going to be stoned to death because of adultery, and the Christ um, appeared and knelt down, and the stories are different. He either wrote it in the sand or said it out loud. Whosoever without sin cast the first stone. Um, and you also know who didn't cast a stone. Um, so rather than being aggressive and hard and judgmental and reactive, it was a very, very light and soft and caring approach. Lifted the woman up and told her to go on and sin no more, in the words of the Bible. Um, Another fascinating story involved Gautama Siddhartha, also known as Buddha. He was talking to some of his students, and during his time, he was not a very popular person either. There were several assassination attempts um, carried out towards him because he was breaking rank with the prevailing wind, so to speak, and people didn't like that. It seems like true progress only happens when things are status quo is challenged. But as he was talking, a man came up to him of a different religious tradition and began saying that he was blasphemous and he was not preaching the right thing, and he was basically a bad person, who walked up and spit in his face. And his students were aghast, and the man walked away. Um, the Buddha continued, and then he um, was preaching again the next day, and the same man appeared, and the students were like, "Oh my goodness, how does this man have the gall to come back here?" And the Buddha welcomed him and said, "Please sit down and join us." And the man was very, very puzzled, and he said, "But I spit in your face yesterday." And Buddha's response was powerful. He said, "That was you yesterday. I don't suspect that's the you here today." Again, a very fluid kind of approach, rather than getting aggressive and hard and judgmental and how dare you. Um, Being able to recognize that um, that we are fluid beings. That the man that spit in his face the day before was not the man standing in front of him today, and he was willing to look at that part of him. So um, I wanted to really kind of stress that, because there's a lot of hardness, aggression, fear permeating much of our um, world right now. And the more we can learn to navigate in a way that is lightly, that is with compassion and ease, it it allows us to draw from a much deeper wisdom of knowing how to be a human being rather than uh, letting our mind take over and react out of fear and judgment and condemnation and what have you. That if we just come back home and recognize this is where I start, that we can move forward in a much wiser way. So I have a reading here that I want to share with you. Um, it's from Aldous Huxley. Um, Obviously, his very famous book, Brave New World, is known by many. But he also wrote another book that I think is may not be quite as prophetic or as dynamic as Brave New World, but it's a wonderful book. It's called Island. And one of the characters in Island said this to another person who was kind of struggling spiritually. Island is a pretty spiritual kind of book, and he was really struggling, about what his path was telling him, and then what kinds of things were going on culturally on this island. And it goes like this. It's dark because you're trying too hard. Lightly, child, lightly. Learn to do everything lightly. Yes, feel lightly, even though you're feeling deeply. Just lightly let things happen and lightly respond to them. I was so preposterously serious in those days. Lightly, lightly. It's the best advice I have ever been given. So throw away your baggage. Go forward. There are quicksands all about you, sucking at your feet, trying to suck you down into fear and self-pity and despair. That's why you must walk so lightly, lightly, my darling. So when we're navigating through our lives and trying to find a way to respond, even in the midst, in the presence of other people's fear or anger or disruption, go lightly. And that can be a reminder, a mantra, a silent prayer you say to yourself when you find yourself getting tensed up. And ego, as we talked several Zen Times ago, ego really kind of takes over and makes things hard and solid and reactive and real edgy because it's trying to protect what we hold on to as our self-concept and what our ego believes we are, thus disconnecting ourselves from, as I said earlier, that deeper true self, the deeper wisdom part. And so we have to step back and allow ourselves to take that nice deep breath and cultivate what a teacher of mine, I don't even want to tell you how long ago it was, reminded me, cultivate your inner smile. And I said, inner smile? And he said, think of the Mona Lisa. That's an inner smile. It's not a big broadcasty smile, but it's that smile of presence that you will be navigating through whatever is arising in your life, recognizing that it isn't our job to try to control or to influence the outcomes of what arises in our lives, but rather to respond with great patience, and great openness, curiosity, and wonder, and great compassion. Um, and so it isn't our job to try to control outcomes. Um, if you consider even the most ardent scientists, when they're doing their research, they cannot say for 100% that A causes B. That's the Aristotelian kind of linear logic that there is a cause and a direct effect. They cannot say that any one cause can create at 100% certainty a kind of um, response. The story of the Buddha and the man spitting in his face, of Jesus kneeling down, and rather than joining in the madness, um, offered something much softer. Um, so even the most ardent scientist has to concede that we can't say with certainty that A causes B, um, because there are too many other variables operating in the realm of existence that could be influencing things in an important way. So we have to step back and lighten up a bit and allow ourselves to recognize that how we move through our life is more about our interaction and how we can influence what's going on without an attachment to the outcome. Any of you out there who are parents certainly know that one. We can certainly try to control um, our role as parents and kids and what have you. Um, but what we have in mind doesn't always turn out. And it doesn't mean it's always bad. It just means that how can we as human beings stay in the presence of what is occurring, whether it's a traffic jam, whether it's a medical issue, whether it's a teenager exerting their uniqueness, whether it's the politics, um, whatever it is. Notice how naturally, instinctively, we get drawn into the fear part of it. What if I'm doing something wrong? What if they don't like me? What if? Rather than come back home and develop that inner smile and say, so how am I going to go lightly? Even though the quicksand is sucking at our feet, even though the quicksand is trying to bring us back into that narrow focus of fear and reactive and judgment and criticism. Just like nobody else really knows what any of you are going through, we don't know what anybody else is going through. So to be able to go lightly, even when it gets rocky, even when it gets uncertain, and feeling out of control. Um, so it's when we talk about the 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 method of Zen, as I talked about in the very first one, recognizing that Zen is a method. And oftentimes, and there's a wonderful book called If It Wasn't for Buddhism, I Couldn't Be Christian. Wonderful book in terms of talking about how the interrelationship of two paths can serve to enrich one another. So we have this opportunity to recognize um, how the method of Zen reminds us, and it isn't just this mind; it's our soul mind. It invites us to stop, come back home, develop that inner smile, and say, "Okay, let's start from here." Because starting from out there and trying to muck around with all the stuff out there in a reactive mode isn't working so well. How about if I come back home, take a deep breath, develop that inner smile, and say, let's begin again. And in the Zen tradition, that's a very famous um, statement is always be a beginner. Always take each moment as a new beginning. Each day is a new beginning. Each breath is a new beginning. Um, and that's a very different kind of way of looking at things, more of a circular, holistic way of looking at being in life than a straight linear of I have to do A, B, C, and D to get to E. and and that can cause a great deal of suffering because we just can't um, impose how we want things to unfold the way we want to. We just can't do that. We can try, um, but it will cause a great deal of suffering because it creates that separateness I talked about several sessions ago of I am here and that is there, and I have to somehow exert some control over that. Rather than how am I going to interact with whatever that is, and it could be catastrophic. It can be, horrible diseases or natural disasters or um, um, any number of things. Problems in relationships or whatever it might be. Um, so it isn't so much about what it is that's occurring that we have to focus on, but how is it I am being in the midst of this occurrence, in the midst of the arrival of what's showing up in our life. Um, and so it ends up being that kind of opportunity, opportunity to remind ourselves, come back here, come back here. And in the Zen tradition, and many others, I'm not just focusing on that, but breathing is so important. Come back to that breath. Let it bring you back to a place of center, a place where you can begin to access a truer, more meaningful, and deeper wisdom than what our logical minds can access. As I said back in the ego session, the ego really has no place in our spiritual growth. No place at all. It has a wonderful place in navigating things like um, paying bills and getting through school and all of that kind of stuff. But when it comes to exploring on a deeper, non-linear level, the ego really has no place in this journey. So it's a matter of go lightly, tread lightly, recognize that it doesn't suddenly make everything easy because it doesn't. And oftentimes, I've heard people say, well, geez, I've been meditating for blah, 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 and it's not making my life any easier. It's not supposed to. It's supposed to make you easier, not life. It's supposed to make you easier. And so I think that's one of the important things in terms of recognizing what Huxley was saying in terms of um, it's dark because you're trying too hard. Tread lightly, lightly, my child. Um, Very important reminder when we're talking about um, cultivating a greater sense of method of human beingness, um, and recognizing ourselves more as a fluid whole rather than a linear line, so to speak. Okay, so what I'd like to do now is I'd like to end with a meditation. Um, that hopefully will serve as that kind of reminder, as that kind of coming back home. Um, and then, if there are any questions or what have you at the end, we can address those. So right now, turn up the music a little bit. Get yourself comfortable. Wherever you may be sitting or laying, just begin to bring your awareness back home, back here, back to right where you are. You spent the first 19 minutes here um, focusing on a screen. I'm focusing on a screen, what have you. Now it's time just to kind of say, okay, enough of that. How about just this? How about just this? Bring your awareness to your physical presence. You're sitting in a chair, laying on the ground. Be aware of how gravity is holding you so that your muscles don't have to exert very much energy. The gravity is just holding you in place. A deep breath, easy in through the nose, and then release out through the mouth. And let the out breath be complete all the way to the very end. And then just rest there for a brief moment before taking the next in breath. And then releasing. All the way. And just rest there. Another breath in, fill up those lungs, and then just feel that sense of letting go, that sense of releasing deeply until you come to the very end of your out breath. And just rest there. And as you continue to do that, slowly just let your breathing come back to a normal rhythm, but always with that attention to following that out breath all the way down to that pause and rest there. And if it helps, just allow the bowl and the tone of the bowl to invite you. And always remember that your thinking mind will always try to distract you, and that's fine. Just return home over and over and over again. Just learn to just follow that out breath all the way down to that pause. Resting. It's time to inhale, do so gently, and then release. And in this meditation, during your out breath, just allow yourself to say silently as you follow your out breath, go lightly, just lightly, just lightly. And then when you find yourself in the pause, rest there and let your inner smile surface. And then when it's time to inhale, do so gently, lightly, lightly. And rest quietly and let your inner smile arrive, surface. Lightly, my child, lightly. And cultivate that deep, deep sense of presence as your inner smile begins to awaken. Lightly, lightly, lightly. Pause. And your mind will want to wander. No judgment, just recognize and return. So lightly. Just slowly let yourself reorient. Open your eyes. And remember that something as simple as this can be something you can return to, even if for 20 seconds, or for a couple minutes, or maybe for a 15-minute meditation. You can utilize this whenever you find yourself getting tense, getting reactive, trying to push back. That ego is trying to take over and say, "Oh, but I'm important," preventing you from accessing a deeper and more meaningful wisdom. Lightly, lightly, and then stay in the pause and let your inner smile arise. And then, as it says in Aldous Huxley's statement, you won't be so preposterously serious. Okay. Well, thank you for showing up. Hopefully, this was beneficial. I would like to end a little bit by reminding folks that the regular half-hour Zen Times will be in 2 weeks. So, you know, watch for it on Facebook and what have you. But next Tuesday, as I have planned to do about every 5 sessions, I will offer an hour where we can explore things in more detail, in more depth. And I put aside an hour to do this. I will be doing it by Zoom this time. I did it by Facebook last time, didn't work out so well. I want to do it by Zoom. So if you are interested in joining in on that, now you can join in with just audio or audio and visual, whatever your comfort level is. In order for me to get the invite out to you, I will need you to let me know you want to come. That's important. And then to also share with me your email address so that I can send out the invitations to those of you who are interested in coming. Even those folks that you think I should already know your email address, which I probably do, but I don't know if you're intending on coming. So it's important to know that too. So next Tuesday will be an hour long. And if there is a topic, if there is something we've covered or something that you're interested in, that you would like to have that hour kind of revolve around, please let me know that too, because I want to make this useful for you. So stay safe, stay safe. Remind yourself continually, come home, cultivate that inner smile, and lightly, my child, lightly. So enjoy your time. Hopefully I can see some of you next week. Otherwise, we will be back in 2 weeks, and be well.